So I've been fighting uphill my entire life. My mom tells me that I used to stiffen up so that she couldn't put me in my car seat. And growing up in Cleveland, Ohio as the middle child, I wanted so desperately to fit in. I wanted so desperately to have attention and be liked and be powerful and be cool. And you'd think I could have gone about that in an easy way by being a nice person, being nice to other people around me. But instead, I was a bully. I got in fights constantly. I got kicked out of nearly every single class that I was in. I turned to vandalism. I stole cars and crashed them for fun. I remember one time in particular, I was at the lunch table and I reached across the table and punched somebody in the face. And that night, when I was at home in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and I put my head in my hands and I cried. I had screwed up again. I tried so hard to do the right thing and couldn't do it. I was a failure no matter what. I made a list that night of the ways that I wanted to kill myself. But when my parents came in my room that night, they held me and laid in bed with me, and they didn't tell me that they were disappointed that I had gotten suspended from school again. They told me they were proud of me and told me that they believed in me and believed I could get through it. When I was 16 and I got kicked out of high school, I went into their room and I told them that I believed in myself and that I knew I would get through it. That same year, I went on my first backpacking trip. We're in the mountains of British Columbia on the coastal range, and we went sea kayaking around Vancouver Island. And I remember on the first day of that trip, I'm loading up my pack, and I had 35 or 40 pounds or so in the pack, and I swung it on my back, and I felt invincible for about the first 3 steps before I realized how hard walking uphill with a pack on actually is. So I put one foot in front of the next, and I was just about ready to quit with every single step, and right as I almost did quit, this kid in front of me fell down, threw off his pack, and said he wouldn't go any further. So I volunteered in that moment to take some weight out of his pack. And I took some apples. I think I took about 10 apples, and I put them in my pack. And in that moment, it was so seemingly small, picking up somebody's apples, but for me, this was the first time in my life that I ever felt like I had done something good for somebody else. I felt powerful for the first time. I felt liked. I felt cool. It was a very different experience for me. Now, our guide on that trip was a guy named Guyby Slingen. That was his actual name, Guyby Slingen. And Guyby had just finished the Appalachian Trail. So to me, Guyby was a hero. He was a god. This is somebody who had the courage to go out and adventure, walking 2,200 miles from Georgia to Maine. He was somebody who was seizing life every single day. And I so desperately wanted to grow up to be like Guyby. We talked a lot on that trip about maybe starting small, doing something like the Buckeye Trail where I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and going around Ohio with it. So when I finally convinced myself that I could do the Appalachian Trail, I was scared, I was excited, I was completely unsure what to expect, but I certainly didn't expect that about halfway through at this scene in Pennsylvania where the rocks are endless, it had been raining for about 15 straight days. It rained for 70 that year on the Appalachian Trail. And I had fallen about a dozen times. And on one of those falls, I picked up one of these rocks in frustration and I chucked it at a tree. And at that moment, I sunk down again and put my head in my hands and I sobbed. This was another of the lowest moments of my life. I felt so selfish for being out there for so long, for 6 months, doing nothing beneficial for anybody in the world but myself. I wasn't carrying anybody's apples, literally or metaphorically. I wasn't doing anything to make the world a better place. So I vowed to myself in that moment that I would make a difference with every day that I had from there on out. The people who knew me before and after that moment say I was a different person. This is me on the first day of the Appalachian Trail and the last, and I'm almost unrecognizable. So since that time, I've had a career of exploration, traveling literally the length of continents, always struggling, always consistently going and pushing beyond what I thought was possible. And it's in those struggles, albeit they've been for the benefit of others, working in wilderness therapy, working to understand sustainability and come back and share those lessons. It's been in those struggles that I've gotten closer and closer to my passion. So when I finally arrived at the wildlife sciences and started working in California with owls, working out in Montana with pallid sturgeon, tracking lynx and wolverines and grizzly bears across the frozen landscapes of winters in Montana, I felt fulfilled. That moment on the Appalachian Trail was finally getting realized. I was making a difference for all these places that I loved and cared about. And I started talking about that with my friends. There was one thing that had been missing, and that's that I can have so much impact as an individual, but if I could find a way to magnify that across the world, we could really have some amazing impact. And so I took on, when I was about 30 years old, perhaps what's been the biggest challenge of my life, the greatest uphill fight. And today we mobilize a network of thousands of people who go outside every single day, and they don't just go for their own self-exploration anymore. They go to collect samples for us, to collect data, addressing environmental issues for our partners, everything from antibiotic resistance to illegal timber harvest to keeping microplastics out of waterways. Today, the challenges that I fight are how to manage a team or raise enough money or run a nonprofit organization. And I never dreamed that would be my challenge, but every time one of these challenges comes up, I think back to that day when I was 12 years old. When my parents came in my room, they could have very easily told me how disappointed they were, but they didn't. They told me they were proud and that they believed in me. One of the greatest gifts that we can give one another and give ourselves is the opportunity for struggle. For me, through my struggles, some chosen and some not, I found my passion. I found who I am as an individual. So my charge to you all is the next time anyone you care about, your son, your daughter, your brother, your sister, your friend, is going through something tough, don't find the solution for them. Don't solve their problem. Tell them you're proud of them and tell them you believe in them. Thanks.